Hi everyone, so welcome back in the series of REST APIs using Spring Boot. So in this video we will explore what is the auto-generated code we get if we generate a project using Spring Initializr. So before looking into what all we get, we need a Spring Boot project. So in the previous video we have created one YouTube project that we are building in this series. We'll quickly go through all the component once. After that, we will look what all components are and why are they needed. So the first thing is src main java. This is the folder where all the application code and all the packages will reside. After that, we have src main resources. In this package, we will store all the resources. For example, it can be properties file, it can be static file, or it can be templates. Then the third part is src test java. This is the folder where all the test cases, which we can write in JUnit, will reside. Then the fourth thing is JRE system library. This is just to indicate what is the Java library we are using. For now we are using Java 8, so it is showing Java SE 1.8. Then we have Maven dependencies. These are the dependency which we have selected when we are generating the Spring project in the Spring Initializr application. Then we have the src folder. Actually, this is the main folder and the first src main java and src main resources. These are the package views of this folder. So the actual code of all the application resides inside this src folder. The next thing we have is the target folder. Initially, this target folder is blank because we haven't built our application yet. But once we build the application, all the generated bytecode or all the .class files will reside into this folder. Then we have help.md. This is just a file which can be used for help. Like if you open this file, you will get some of the paths to some of the links like tutorials and other kind of stuff. Then we have some of the files which is related to Maven. Because this is a Maven project, so these files are generated. In these files, pom.xml is the most important file because all the metadata for the application and all the dependencies are present in the pom.xml file. So let's explore the pom.xml file and look what all is auto-generated. So this is the pom.xml file and we'll go through the pom.xml file line by line because this is very important if we talk about Spring Boot, because this is the file which provides all the configurations. So in the line number 1, we have the XML versioning over here. Here we are using 1.0 version and the encoding is UTF-8. Then we have some project related configuration for Maven like POM version. Then we have XML schema instances and the version of Maven we are using. Then we have model version. This is the model version of POM. Here we are using 4.0.0 version of POM. Then we have the parent tag, which means our application has a parent which is Spring Boot Starter Parent. As we know that the Spring Boot project is auto-configured, that means we get some of the default configurations when we generate the Spring Boot project. So there will be some place where those configurations are stored, right? So this parent tag defines that parent project where all those Spring Boot configurations, or we can say the default configurations, are stored. So here we are using Spring Boot Starter Parent and version is 2.4.2. That means we are using this version of Spring Boot Starter Parent. Then we have some of the configuration that we gave when we initialize the project, that is group ID, which is the name of the package, artifact ID, which will be the unique identifier for this project. Then we have version. By default it comes with 0.0.1/snapshot. This is the default version of our application. Then we have name. As we given the name YouTube, so here we are getting YouTube as the name. So then we have description. This is also picked from the Spring Boot Initializr application. Then we have properties. In properties we define the version of Java we are using. Currently we are using Java 1.8, so here it is showing Java version 1.8. Then the next tab is dependencies. When we are generating the project, we have given three dependencies which are actuator, web and DevTools. Actuator is used to check the health of the application at runtime. Then we have starter web. As we are writing REST APIs, so for that this starter web is required because all the annotations and everything is present in this dependency. Then we have DevTools. DevTools is a very developer friendly dependency. For example, if we do some change in our application, then it will pick it up and restart the application. Otherwise, manually we have to stop the existing application and start the application again. But using this DevTool dependency, this process will be done automatically. What it does is, it will check for any update in the source code, and once it found any update, it will restart the application. So by default, Spring Initializr added the dependency scope, that is runtime. That means whenever the application is running, at that time this DevTool dependency will be added to this project. Then the fourth dependency, which is automatically added by Spring Initializr, is the starter test. As we know that whenever we are writing some code, we should also write the test cases. So due to that, this dependency, this starter test dependency, is automatically added. And here the scope of this dependency is test, which means this will be added when the application is being tested. Then we have the build tab, in which we provide some plugins or some of the configuration which were needed at the time the application is building. So here one more plugin is automatically added by Spring Initializr, that is Maven Plugin, because we are using Maven. So this is the pom.xml file where we define all the dependencies and all the metadata about the application. Now suppose you want to add some database to your application. Maybe you want to add MySQL or MongoDB. Then you can simply add the dependencies over here. You can add Spring Data JPA and MySQL or MongoDB dependencies over here. Or you want to add Spring Security. Then the only thing you have to do is you have to add the dependencies in the Dependencies tab. As you can see here, this is the pom.xml, which is the XML version of this application, but we have some other things as well. So now explore those. Then we have effective pom. If you click on this, here you will get all the dependencies and those versions. This means this is the actual pom that is being used. If you scroll down a bit, you will get all the dependencies and all the configuration which are being used. Now here you can see the dependency hierarchy. Here you can see and understand that starter project itself have some dependencies. For example, we can use JSON format in the application for request and response. So for example, you can see here in Spring Boot starter web, we have Spring Boot starter JSON dependency as well. That means what all dependency the starter web uses will be mentioned over here. Here you can see the Jackson API is there. Jackson is used for the JSON conversion. So what all dependencies required for those projects, those are added here and you can see over here. So all these dependencies will be added to our project. Then we have the Dependencies tab where you can find what all dependency you have added. So in the Dependencies tab you can find what all dependencies that we have added. Then we have the Overview tab where you can find all the configuration and the metadata regarding this project, like artifact details, like packaging type, group ID, artifact ID, version of the application, description for the application and other stuff. This is just a form representation of what we have seen in the pom.xml file. As we have seen in the dependency hierarchy, you can go to the Maven Dependencies tab and you will find a lot of dependencies which are present here. So these are all the dependencies which were added. So let's talk about resources first, then we'll move to the Java part. So inside resources you will find three things, which are static, template and application.properties. This static is used to store static data for the application. Template contains template for the application and application.properties. This is one of the most important thing over here because this is the one place where we give all the configurations. For example, you can give application name over here. You can give all the database configuration in the application.properties. As we said earlier that Spring Boot comes with some default configuration, but if you want to override those configuration with yours, you have to store those configuration in application.properties. This application will use the properties which are present in the application.properties. That means it simply overrides the default configurations. So whatever you want to override or whatever you want to customize, you can give the configuration in application.properties. We have one more thing, that is profiling, which we'll discuss in upcoming videos. If you see inside src main java, you will find one package, that is the base package, which is com.pithoracademy.youtube. So inside this main package, we have only one file, that is youtube application.java. This name will depends on the name that you have given in Spring Initializr app. There I have given YouTube, that's why I am getting YouTube application.java. If you open this file, you will get some lines of code containing a class that is YouTube application. Let's talk about the code line by line. So the first thing is the package name, then we have some import statements, then we have Spring Boot application annotation, which is the most powerful annotation which actually starts the application and configure it as a Spring Boot application. This annotation tells the compiler that this is not an ordinary class. It's a special class which is a Spring Boot project. As we know that this is not an ordinary class and it's a kind of special, or we can say it's a configuration class. So we can mark this class as a special class using @configuration. So @configuration annotation is used to mark a class as a configuration class. That means this class or this bean will contain configuration for our project. Then we have one more annotation, that is enable auto configuration, which tells the compiler that this project will use auto configuration which were present in the parent project. So for that we'll give @enable auto configurations. Then we have component scan. We have one wonderful thing in Spring Boot, that is the Ioc container. What it will do is it will scan all the application files, that means every class in our application, and based on the type of that file, if the bean is required for that, it will create a bean. If we mark any bean with component or bean or any other annotation, so it will create beans for those files or those classes. So now we are aware of @configuration, @enable auto configuration and component scan. Now let's come back to the Spring Boot application. Actually, Spring Boot application, this annotation is nothing else but it is the combination of these three annotations, which means Spring Boot application includes @configuration, @enable auto configuration and @component scan. Then we have one special class, that is Spring application, which tells this is a Spring application, and using this class we can run the Spring application. So here we have run method, and in that run method we are passing two parameters. The first one is the class which is YouTube application, which is the main class, and the arguments that we got in this class. So this concludes all the auto-generated code, and in the next video we will create a sample request and we will run the application. See you in the next video.